Defence Minister Nosiviwe Maphisa-Nqakula is in Egypt to represent South Africa at the 75th commemoration of the Second World War Battle of El Alamein on Saturday. El Alamein was a turning point in Germany's occupation of North Africa when Allied forces comprising South Africa, Britain, Australia and New Zealand defeated the Germans under field-marshal Erwin Rommel. Oil and access to colonized Africa through the Mediterranean Sea were the reasons why the war between European nations ended up in North Africa. Our reporter Nthakoana Ngatane spoke exclusively to the minister earlier. The minister articulated the special role played by South African troops there, especially black soldiers who were often unarmed and played a junior role doing menial jobs.
It's very significant for South Africa to be part of these processes, to commemorate this Battle of El Alamein, precisely because we have a number of our people who lost their lives in that battle. We know that we have plus minus 500 of those who died, but we also have more than 1,000 who went missing or are unaccounted for. So where we will be going tomorrow, which is 300 kilometers away from here, from Cairo, we will be visiting a grave site where some of the graves of our South African soldiers are. But it is also important for South Africans to always remember all of these battles where South Africans contributed towards fight against fascism, Nazism, against Hitler. Because when people talk, you hear very little said about the role which was played by, in particular, black soldiers. You will always be told that, yes, South Africans fought, but people will not single out black soldiers, particularly because these are people who were recruited to go to this war, to fight along the sides of the Allied forces. But in fact, they were not armed. They went in there as laborers to dig trenches, to help carry the equipment, etc., etc. But in the course of the battle, they ended up actually having to fight themselves and thereby losing their lives. So the role played by black soldiers from South Africa in the fight against Nazism is one which South Africans should never ever forget, particularly because these people left South Africa very much against the regime at that time. I'm told Smuts, who was leading, who was the head of the Republic of South Africa, was totally against and in support, in fact, of the fascists, in support of Hitler's program, and therefore was against our people fighting along together with the Allied forces. We know, for instance, Jan Vorster, who ended up being the Prime Minister of South Africa, at the time was a very young man and in the youth, and they established something, Osewag or something, which was a movement that was mobilizing South African young people, discouraging them from going into the war and fight along Allied forces, but rather support fascism from South Africa. So we have a very rich history. Doesn't matter if you go to Europe, Bata, for instance, or you talk Delvenwood battle, you will see the heroic role played by black soldiers from South Africa. And it's something which we should never ever forget, that the struggle in South Africa and the bravery in particular of our people was not just demonstrated for the first time when we were fighting against apartheid.